In today's video, we are going to preview and sort of look and do an opposition analysis of Newcastle and why I think this, which I'm flashing up on screen now, is how Chelsea can dismantle Newcastle. And to get to grips with how that might be done, we're going to go through the opposition analysis that I've gone through for this game. So here you've got the stats from this season. 49% possession, 0.8 possession for Newcastle, 9th best in the league. Only 82.6 pass completion, so a few sides better than them that are on the worst on possession front. You can see Arsenal below 50%, an interesting one. But that sort of highlights how they've been playing this season, a little bit back and forth in their approach. Then you've got Newcastle, who've only scored 8 goals this season, and they only average 12.8 shots per game, which is the 13th worst, or the 13th. So like the least, 12.8 in the league. Okay, so the least being 9.4, they're 13th for 12.8 shots per game. And then on this side, you've got shots per game conceded, and they're right up there in 5th. They concede 15.4 shots per game. Again, you can see their tackles and interceptions per game there too. So what can you see from this is when you put Chelsea into perspective and you use the context of Chelsea, probably going to come and control the ball. Or at Stamford Bridge, Chelsea are probably going to have a bit more of the ball. They're going to sit off and you're going to get shots off. Can you be clinical? Where are those shots going to come from? How can you maneuver to get the highest XG value of those shots against Newcastle? Where are their soft spots? Let's have a little look. So here we're looking at the Fulham game. They lost this 3-1, I believe. This was the first goal. Jimenez, again, just getting the ball in the box. There's not much to this goal in terms of they're defending with a 4. There's a bit of a split here, but you know, the midfielder, he's blocking that lane and there's no runners. There will be something to be said about runners from this area of the pitch. But currently in this image, there isn't any, so that's fine. Jimenez gets that ball. The defenders aren't tight enough. He manages to get the ball and get a shot off and score a very nice goal. But nothing too outrageous in here. Like I say, 4 there, 5 there. And then there's one man out of the picture as the transition threat. Here's the other one for the 2-0, I believe, or this may have just been another chance they created. Again, you've got their 4 across the back, and we're going to speak about how they press, because I think that's quite a big way of how Chelsea can play through them. It tends to be sort of a 4-1-4-1, fairly similar to how Chelsea sometimes press with the 4-1-4-1 when not in the 4-4-2. And I'll try and explain that in a minute as to how Newcastle become a 4-4-2 at times and who it is that actually jumps out from the 4-4-1 press. So we'll speak about that. But here you can see they've always got at least one of their midfielders having to track into this space to try and keep the gap minimal between Guimaraes so he's not defending the entire middle of the pitch on his own. But even here, you can see there was a space for, I don't know who this is in picture, it might be Adama Traore. He's driving inside and he's able to exploit that middle of the pitch because Guimaraes has got so much of that to protect on his own. So that is an important aspect to keep in mind with Newcastle. Here you can see 4-1-4-1 sort of pressure. Again, you've got the striker here. You've got the line of 4 behind with Gordon as that left winger. Again, he's trying to cut off this progression here. You've got the 2 central midfielders, and you've actually got here would be the other one, so the DM. Again, he's retreating at this point, so you could say that this has more so became 2 strikers with these 2, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. You could line it up like that in terms of it's pressed to become a 4-4-2 from the 4-4-1-1, 4-1-4-1. And here's another example, but this one against Man City. And I think this one is really important because the 2 players we've highlighted here, you've got Gordon, who is the striker in this game against City, not Isaac. And you've got their line of 4. Look who's been baited. So from that 4, City are playing with their 1, 2, 3 across the back, 2-man pivot. And then this position here, very important. So I think this is Gundogan on this occasion. But you've got Rico Lewis, who's pushed, of course, he's the right back. He's pushed all the way up into here, into this pocket. He's managed to pin Joelinton, who is actually cutting in and becoming a back 5 for Newcastle. So they were more or less pressing in a 5-4-1. And then, as I said, this bit of pressure, which I think we're going to talk about here, if in Chelsea's case, what you're trying to do is you're trying to lure one of these wider players onto the wide centre back before you can make the play. So I think we're going to show it here. Well, these are the 2 options of how we could play. All right. In order for Chelsea to lure one out, these are going to be the spare men, and they're going to be either side of this sort of in this 4-1-4-1, right? So if this is Guimaraes, these are the two players that have to sort of stretch that out as much as possible and just cause issues for Guimaraes in terms of, again, how I said earlier, defending the entire middle of the pitch on his own and maybe even forcing these two to not be able to get close to Lavia and Caicedo. We'll speak about the selection in a minute. But the reason Reece James is here and Cucurella here is because I think this is a bit of a discussion we need to have. For this game specifically, I think you could do either of these, okay? The main thing is having Colwill centrally, in my opinion, and I would prefer to have Colwill central with Fofana as a wide centre-back option. Again, if we can bait them towards us, can we go inside to bounce through? So once that man is baited onto either or. It would work in this sense too. Like I say, with Cucurella on this side, James in this right centre-back position. It would mean no Gusto, but as with this could be James or Gusto instead. So it gives a bit of variety. But again, the main aim is this is going to be the spare man because Palmer is not going to be left alone. Guimaraes is going to have to commit to one side or the other, and he's going to choose Palmer's side 9 times out of 10 in this progression. Jackson is going to be having his job to pin the centre-backs back. They're not the most athletic centre-backs, so he should be able to pin them, use his athleticism as a threat, and therefore keep them where they are in position. The wingers are nice high and wide, keeping those fullbacks where they are. And again, this is just going to cause a lot of issues for Guimaraes. And that is going to open up this space. Like I say, if you can attract that ball so that it actually, that player towards the ball, Colwill here, can he bounce that into Lavia who can find the space? Can he even find that himself? Because he's more than talented enough, Colwill. If Cucurella can even come out here to receive the ball and just receive it, and then he's got acres of space to travel. Okay, Sancho can also drop into here to receive. There's lots of different things you can do, but if he's pinning his fullback here, here is the space. What else could Newcastle do though? And this is where Joelinton comes into play. And he played in a back five, or he was in midfield, but he would drop in often between Lewis Hall and Dan Burn as that sort of third left-sided defender at times in between the two. And he was often sort of pinning with Haaland, but also close enough to these midfielders to really squeeze this pocket of the pitch. No space for Gundogan, no space for Rico Lewis. Some space for Gvardiol if he can receive on the outside of the box. But as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there's another one out here which you can't see. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1. So it's more of a 5-4-1 deep block at that point. One thing that I definitely noticed when I watched, because I watched the City, I watched the Fulham, I watched... What else did I watch? Tottenham, I think, when they beat Tottenham. I watched 3 or 4 full 90s of Newcastle whilst doing this opposition analysis. And one key feature as their outball is whether it's Trippier or Livramento, that is their outball. They will stretch in behind that right back, and sometimes they'll start deep and he'll make a late penetrative run. That's not right. Penetrative. I can't say that. But he'll make that run late sometimes, or sometimes he'll even just get really high up and stay in that position early, ready for that switch. So again, I think there's another example of this later. That seems to be their outball, especially when whoever's playing on the right, so it has been Murphy. It can, of course, be Almiron, but I think it'll be Murphy. Cuts in, or even Harvey Barnes if they decide to play both. If they cut inside, that opens that outball, and that seems to be where they want to hit in order to relieve that pressure. How will they set up to play through? This was probably the key against City. This was their goal against City, and it was really well worked. You have this back three. By the way, if you're wondering why I keep breathing really heavily, just got a bit of a cold or flu or something, so a little bit ill at the minute. So do bear with me on that front. But we've got the back three of Newcastle spread out here. Again, City pressing quite nicely. I mean, it's more so they don't have enough pressure here in the middle of the pitch to stop this pass. Clever from Joelinton, quickly on the turn, find that space. Again, that pivot is operating on different levels. This is something we speak about quite a lot. Able to then turn, find a play through, and then look at this little overload they've got on this side, because then when Gordon peels across to make this run in a minute, these players in the middle, they don't know whether they should be zoning off this space ready for if Joelinton drives inside, or so if they should apply pressure to Joelinton, or I think that's Joelinton, or it might be Guimaraes. If they should apply pressure to the ball carrier, or if they should follow Gordon coming across, or if one of them has to sort of shuffle across. Because look, there's 4 on that overload side of the pitch. He's pinning Harvey Barnes, I think this is out here, pinning their right back out here, so that might be Walker at the time. But it's just very interesting in the sense of, look, now Gordon can run off the shoulder. These two both looking to apply pressure, creates that little space in behind for him to run off the shoulder, and it creates a goal. So what you have to be careful with Newcastle is they do have quality. And if they create those overloads on one side of the pitch, it becomes very much about that communication side of things in defence. Who's going to pick up who's going to apply pressure on the ball. Something that is still growing with this Chelsea team, I believe, in terms of Colwill and Fofana, who applies the pressure, who sort of sits off. I think they are really perfectly blended. I've spoken about this before, but I do think there's just a little bit of timing that still needs to find its way with them too, which will come with time. Timing will come with time, funnily enough. So yeah, I think that's somewhere that Newcastle could exploit, but I think if Chelsea are on their game, and I think if that communication level is high, then I think it'll be okay. Again, Newcastle in this 5-4-1, these wingers are going to be important because they're going to be able to find space on the outsides of the blocks against Lewis Hall and against Tino Livramento or Kieran Trippier. For me, Jadon Sancho starts this game because I think that the way Sancho can sort of get this ball out wide and drag pressure to almost split these defenders a little bit more, find space for someone like Cucurella, Jackson, Palmer, to make these runs in between these lines here that I'm sort of like showing my arrow. I think that's going to be really important because these midfielders, they have split coverage roles when they're playing in this 5-back. What they are essentially having to mark the ball players and try and stop things coming through between the lines. But as soon as it does break through the lines, their men, of course, are this player and this player that are operating in the half pockets. So they've got dual coverage roles here, as you can see. And I think by playing someone like Sancho, who can draw pressure towards him, he can take the ball under pressure, a bit like Grealish for City, and he can retain the ball in tight spaces before then dumping it off to someone like Cucurella, who I thought was really good against Panathinaikos at doing this in this space. He can then get the ball in space, attract the pressure, and then we can attack this zone of the pitch, which is very, very important. Now, with Joelinton's role, he also has the responsibility of Palmer, as we spoke about earlier. If Guimaraes or one of the other midfielders has to apply pressure on the ball in here, Palmer can become free, and they're not going to let that happen, especially in a back 5. One of the players is going to have the responsibility to jump out, and that would be Joelinton on Palmer if it is how they set up like they did against Man City, which would then create this space for Madueke to make these clever runs. And Palmer's got the quality. And I do think somewhere that Chelsea could target Newcastle is actually in the air at the back post. And we saw this yesterday with Mudryk, which I found hilarious because I'd already prepared this video. But Mudryk scored a header. And Maresca supposedly said they've been working on this in terms of attacking those spaces as the wingers. And I actually think that against Lewis Hall, and if you can drag Joelinton out and create that big sort of drift between the fullback and the left centre-back, I think Madueke, in terms of getting on the ends of some crosses, if Palmer can, again, if he can attract the pressure, is going to be very key in this game. And I think it could be something that Chelsea look to exploit. So that is something to keep an eye on. Newcastle can go man-to-man. This was against Brighton. Again, centre-back coming up. He's putting the pressure on the ball, along with the 4 midfielders, 2 strikers. Well, Gordon coming in from out wide. They might do this against Chelsea. It's very possible Brighton play in this way, but I only think it would come from deep scenarios like set pieces in our own half, goal kick routines, and maybe sort of throw-ins from within Chelsea's own half. Apart from that, I do expect them to sit a lot deeper, more like this, against Chelsea and try and plug those middle gaps. But if they do, and when they do play like this, it is important Chelsea to continue to play in that direct fashion and not neglect that part of the game. Because especially with the likes of Jackson, if you can get Madueke in behind, like I mentioned earlier, if you can stretch Newcastle a few times when they do this, they're more likely to then drop off a little bit. And that's when you can then start to play in these sort of game plans and get things ticking in that way. Again, you have the 3-back of City, and this is actually what it comes to, right? When that ball goes long, Brighton are able to sort of receive that ball, in this zone. Yes, they're a 2v3, but they're able to, again, get at them directly before they can fully reset all out of position. He's trying to apply pressure on the ball. He's a little bit behind the play. And this is where Welbeck's goal comes from when Brighton go 1-0 up. So that's quite important. And here it is again, those two with the long ball coming over. So I think that's important. As I said earlier, this is another example of this time Livramento starting a bit deeper. Got that 3 at the back, 3 in midfield, but he's the spare man. So if they're trying to work their way out, they're going to try and apply pressure. If Matoma ends up trying to drag in here, when that ball comes out and when that ball comes over, then the ball is going to be into Livramento, who will make that darting run forwards. Again, the 5-4-1, we've spoke quite a lot about that. Just cutting off those central zones is going to be hard. That's what they're going to try to do. So Chelsea do have to find a lot of joy from those wide areas. Again, good pressure here from Newcastle. Notice it's only 4 players. And this is why I say it's going to be interesting to the degree at which Newcastle decide to press Chelsea, because against City, there was points where they only pressed with 4 players. Again, it's tight in certain areas, but you're able to get the ball. He can bounce it out to the spare man here. They're trying to lock off one area of the pitch and keep it down one side, but it's fairly easy to maneuver out of when they're playing with 4 players, because they're trying to be more solid on the other end of the pitch with Joelinton towards the back 5, cutting off those half spaces. So that does make it easier for City to control this period of the game. So I do think that is something. Here it is again, this time with 4 players again. This is something that I expect Chelsea to do well, and try and manipulate these situations. And I think Maresca will be very sort of intendant, he'll be very persistent on wanting to play this way. Here, this was the out ball for this play, I think, where, again, you've got all these players sort of applying pressure. So Grealish is now the out ball because there's a late man, this guy here, so Gundogan. This is where the other midfielder is going to then try and apply pressure, in which case the fullback is going to have to follow Grealish. And again, this is why I come back to Sancho. Retain that ball under pressure, and then can we turn out? It's not that Mudryk and Neto don't have the ball retention, but they're a little bit more direct in that sense, and even Madueke on the other side, quite direct. So I don't mind, and I quite like the idea of Sancho being in this area for these build-out schemes where we hit these channels at times, look to bring the ball down so that we can then get players facing it forwards and sort of retain that a little bit. Again, space outside of this block, this time Vardiol, he's split, and again, that ball is on, or you can even come out this way to do it in 2 passes. But again, this is where the space is. There is space behind this Newcastle block. This time it is more of the 1-4, but Gordon's the one, again, joining. That's going to apply pressure to the centre-back, which is why then this becomes that space. And that's what we spoke about earlier with Cucurella being the one who can receive in this area to then drive Chelsea forward, which is why I think it's going to be important. And another reason why I would start Lavia and Caicedo in this game, because 1, they were excellent. 2, I think we need the physicality to deal with a midfield 3 of Tonali, Joelinton and Guimaraes. And I think it's just worth sticking with that and trying to exploit this sort of outball with someone like Cucurella or even Gusto at left back. So here it is again, the same example. Lewis is pinning this side of the pitch. Acres of space here. Even here, not enough pressure on the ball. You can already see, probably as soon as he takes that touch, there's going to be somebody at least close enough. And that leads us, I believe, this is the last slide, to talking about that Joelinton position for the last time and why I think Chelsea can attack that far post. And I think on this occasion, this may have actually been Lloyd Kelly instead of Lewis Hall. But that, again, it gives you that space to exploit the back post. Can Madueke score in that position of the pitch? Can Palmer be in this area to attract Joelinton, or even if it's Lloyd Kelly? Because in this instance, Lloyd Kelly has gone inside, which has meant Joelinton's had to actually defend on the outside of the 4 rather than between the centre-back and the full-back. So it's going to be interesting to see what Newcastle do against Chelsea. As I said, I think the right-back out ball is something to very much watch against Newcastle. They've only scored 8 goals. I think they're quite limited. I don't think they've been at their best form. And I think that quite a few of their players are in poor form in terms of individuals. I think there's a few different ways you can get at this side. I do think the lineup is important. And I do think it's going to be another one of those games where Chelsea look to control the ball, have a little bit more of it. But can they hit direct if Newcastle do go aggressive? Can they, if not, play through the lines, control the game, find the spaces on the outside of the blocks as such, try to peel Newcastle apart, and then be clinical? Because as we said at the start, we'll go back to the stats. 15.4 shots conceded per 90. Chelsea have to get their shots away and they have to be clinical in this game. Let me know your score predictions down below. Any questions, I'll try to get to them before the game is played on Sunday. I am away this weekend, so the match review will be on Tuesday, I believe, because I get back home Monday night. Probably won't have enough time to record, so I'll go for a Tuesday upload for the Newcastle review. Then we'll have the cup game and we'll have plenty of content again next week. So let me know your score predictions down below. Any questions, leave them in the comments. Please do drop a like, as it really does help out the channel. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys next time.